All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Nicky Muscle from MitigateStress.com. In this video, we're going to be covering the basic fundamentals of posture. And we're basically going to go over one simple corrective exercise, and that is the standing postural corrective drill, also known as PPP, like we like to call it, which is the posterior engagement of the spine. And there's a lot more to it. There's a ton of cues and techniques and tips just to go over with this one alone, hundreds, in fact, which we do cover in our free recovery routine you can download below, as well as our coming soon, our ultimate walking guide, which will be our paid guide coming soon. And with this video, we wanted to make it a little bit more digestible for our viewers because this is a lot of information to cover, especially for a free video on YouTube, because sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming. So we wanted to simplify this and just go over the basic fundamentals for you guys, because we do have a lot of customers and clients constantly coming to us saying, hey, where do I begin with posture? Because you keep telling us posture is pretty much the most essential component of health and fitness, and we do believe that it is the most important aspect of health and fitness. It seems to influence every aspect of health and fitness more than anything, even more than diet. You will optimize your digestion, your circulation, your drainage. You will optimize your recovery, your cognitive function, etc., etc. The list goes on. It's thousands of reasons why to optimize your posture, your biomechanical function, your walking gait, your physical performance, your mental performance, everything. So let's get started. One thing I do want to mention is we actually got a few pro athletes that we are sponsoring now. We're pretty stoked on, so be on the lookout for that. And this is also a video for them because no one teaches posture. And so let's get a baseline. Let's understand it. Again, our paid content, our free recovery routine, which you can download below, will have so many more cues and techniques. We just want to go over a baseline overview in this video. So let's begin with our feet, knees, and hips. With the feet, knees, and hips, I want you to start by finding a marker on the tiles. So for example, I like to take my big toes on these tiles. And most importantly, what I'm looking for is making sure that my feet, knees, and hips are hip width apart and pointed straight forward. I don't want my knees pointed out. I don't want my knees pointed in. Same thing with my feet. I don't want them caving in. I don't want them coming out. And I do have you from this perspective, this angle, talking like this, because I want you to get a perspective from my viewpoint so you can start to better assess yourself on a daily basis and become aware, because the mirror is your best friend when it comes to optimizing your biomechanical function, your posture, right? So let's go back to this. So again, using the mirror, I'm making sure that my ankles are nice and neutral. And what I like to do is I like to look at the ankle bones here, making sure that my ankle bones aren't like pointed out like this way. There's two, obviously, so you want to make sure that they're nice and even, right? Hip width apart. My big toes, my feet are pointed straight forward. Some people are more internally rotated, very rare. And some people, most people, I'd say 90% plus, are externally rotated. If you are overly externally rotated, it does help to kind of get more slightly internally rotated. Whatever you do, just always make sure that the knees, feet, and hips are always pointed in the same direction. What you don't want to do is have your feet out like this and your knees out like this. A lot of people can't understand that concept. They think knee valgus is technically always bad. It isn't, as long as you are in alignment with your feet, knees, and hips. So back to this, we're going to reiterate one more time. It's going to get annoying. Feet, knees, and hips, hip width apart, point in a straight line, right? That's your foundation. The other thing is you can also add some ground tension and you can squeeze out gently. You can squeeze in. Play with both, because oftentimes we're weak in both forms of ground tension, whether it's abduction or adduction, squeezing in or squeezing out. So from there, again, just always make sure that you have this cue in the back of your mind, because as we go up the chain, you're going to notice that things tend to go out of alignment, right? So the next thing is get as tall as you possibly can. I'm going to pan this up a little bit more. As we keep our feet, knees, and hips hip width apart, pointed straight, now we're going to go up to the pelvis. The pelvis can do so many things. That's the hips. You can shift right. That's my common issue before I began fixing my posture. So shifting right was what I used to do. I used to twist as well. So a shift plus a twist. Let's get the camera more over here. Right, a shift plus a twist, and then I tended to tilt up like that. So I had some nasty scoliosis that I had to work on for many, many weeks and months. And on top of that, if I go to this angle from the side, I tended to arch a lot. My spine, see that? My lower back, right? So the other thing is, now that we're from the side, let's go back to the feet, knees, and hips. Hip width, pointed straight, right? But we also want to position ourselves over our heels, right? That's one more thing. And you can kind of see it kind of already fixes that anterior pelvic tilt. So some people will be tucked more. Again, that's kind of more rare. Some people will be more arched like that. We want you to just find neutral. So find your belt line, stand tall as you can, and just find that neutral position, right? So we're going to spend a little bit of time on the pelvis because it is technically like the foundation. Excuse my camera work. So again, we're over the heels. Feet, knees, and hips are hip width apart, pointing straight. The hips are tucking or more rather level depending on where your position is. So I'm level. I'm standing nice and tall. I'm lifting my ribs off of my pelvis. I'm getting as tall as I possibly can. I'm creating space in this abdominal cavity, right? So I'm neutral with my pelvis. I'm not arched. I'm not tucked. Overly tucked. If you are overly arched, you will have to tuck. If you are overly tucked, you will have to gently arch. Just find that neutral standpoint. Again, the belt line should be this. The water bucket of your pelvis should not be pouring water out here. It should not be pouring water back here. It should be nice and level, right? All right, now let's go to the front side again. Back to that. So again, recalibrating my feet, knees, and hips, making sure we're still abiding to those cues we just talked about, and making sure that we're abiding to the cues we talked about with the pelvis as well. But furthermore with the pelvis, we can shift, we can twist, we can tilt. Let's fix that. Let's bring it back to neutral. So we might have to shift back to the left. Get tall. Right? Tucking if I have to. This is what I have to do. And be aware of the twisting. Are you twisting more to one side? Or are you twisting more to that side? Twist back to neutral. Making sure that everything below is nice and stable and still in alignment. And then we're just going to try to get as level as we possibly can with that pelvis. And become aware, and again, assess every day doing this. This is a drill. This is a corrective. And we're squeezing the ground. All right, so that's pretty much that. Just to recap, feet, knees, and hips, straight, hip width apart. We went to the side, we're over our heels. We're finding a nice neutral position for the pelvis. I have to tuck. You might have to arch. Most people have to tuck, right? When I say tuck, you're not really squeezing your glutes. You're just tucking the pelvis. So that's more of an abstract cue. Then we go back to this, making sure that we're not shifting, twisting, or tilting. You might have to tilt to that side. Lifting the ribs off of the pelvis, creating space in the abdominal cavity. Now let's go skip this angle a little bit more, or this area of the body a little bit more, making sure that we're not neglecting anything down below that we just corrected or just became aware of. Now we're going to go up to the collarbone because it's very similar to the pelvis. We can oftentimes find ourselves shifting to one side with the collarbone more, or the ribs kind of shifted more to one side like this. So that's a little bit more advanced. We might have to picture our shoulder, one shoulder going wider than the other, right? But I like to just say, hey, get both lats wide, like a lat spread, like a douchebag in the gym who's getting a really wide lat spread. I like to say, get out nice and wide, keep the hands neutral under the shoulders, right? And make sure that collarbone is nice and level. Just like the pelvis is level, we want that collarbone level. Imagine the collarbone is like a bucket, right? It's not spilling water out this way. It's not spilling water out that way. It is nice and level and neutral. All right, everyone's like, well, you have to have a natural curve of the spine. The natural curve that people are talking about is way over exaggerated. So we want to be able to practice this position, which is PPP. That's posterior engagement of the pelvis, posterior engagement of the thoracic spine, and posterior engagement of the cervical spine as well. It's just a shape that we are practicing. You can also do this while you're walking. Now, when you're doing this, you don't want to tense up too much. That's with any postural corrective that we do. We want to explore that new range of motion, understand it, engage it, and become familiar with it. But then we want to try to hold that position while we're relaxed. That's the key. So again, collarbone is level, right? The shoulders are up and out. That's the one thing I didn't mention. So we're not forward with the shoulders, right? We're not that. But we're also not back and down. We're not pinching our shoulder blades back. That's going to create a lot of compression inwards. We don't want to do that. So instead we want to go up without engaging our traps, without over tensing our traps. And then we want to go out like we were talking about earlier, like the douchebag spread from the gym, right? Now, everything in between the collarbone and the pelvis has to be spacious. We have to create space. How do we do that? Well, this is another abstract cue. We want to get as tall as we can. Sometimes I like to take my hands under my ribs and try to literally, physically lift my ribs up as high as I can. This is where the trigger points come in. This is why trigger pointing can be very essential, because we're in the lab, we're doing these correctives. Maybe we can't quite get into the cues that we're talking about. Therefore, we have to go do some trigger points, 1, 2, maybe 3, 5 minutes. For instance, for this one, if I can't get more spacious within my abdominal cavity, I might need to go use a softball to trigger point my abs a little bit because they might be overly tense, right? All right, and then now we're going to recap again, checking everything. Feet, knees, hips. Are we still pretty neutral, level? All right, maybe engaging some ground tension, making sure that we're not going back to shifting with the hips. We're shifting back more neutral, tucking if we need to. Chest is nice and tall to keep that collarbone nice and level. Shoulders are up and out. Now, why I say shoulders are up and out, because that lifts the lats up, that stretches the pelvis, right? That stretches the entire, pretty much posterior chain, the entire body actually, because the lats are connected to the glutes, and oftentimes our lats are kind of tucked into our back pockets from poor cues, poor techniques from conventional garbage training techniques that were taught years ago, or just you've sat a lot at work and your arms are down like this constantly, right? So now you can kind of see we're just trying to create space. Again, this is just a basic overview of posture. We go into so much more detail on our paid and free guides. But as you can see, we're just trying to create space. We're trying to pull the slack out of the fascia, out of the skin. So that's kind of like our biomarkers that we can use with the mirror. So just to recap again, feet, knees, and hips are neutral, pointed straight forward. I might have to internally rotate my feet a little bit if I am overly externally rotated. I'm tucking the butt. Sometimes if I tuck the butt, I can feel a nice stretch right here, my quads, my upper hips. Getting nice and tall, collarbone is level, pelvis is level, and I'm creating space in that abdominal cavity. I'm breathing through my ribs like a fish with gills, 360 expansion. Shoulders are up and out. And I'm going to show you from the back side. Shoulders are up and out because we don't want the scapula to be poking out like that. It's kind of hard for me to do that because I fixed it, because back then it was really, what do you call it? Weaned scapula. I can't really, how the heck do you make a weaned scapula? I can't really do it anymore. Hey, I'm pretty happy. I'm telling you, this stuff works. That's why we got our paid guide. Be on the lookout. And anyways, just to recap, we want to create space. We want to pull slack out of the fascia, and we want to make sure that we're not just having wrinkles or like this back fat here. So you will get taller doing this. You will eliminate this ugly back fat. Even if you are a little bit tubby, you will actually reduce this a lot. A lot of people are overly obsessed with this, trying to lose as much fat as they can. But we need healthy levels of fat. And sometimes it's just your posture is just really bad. It's just so much compression that makes your body look like a giant blob. So we got to really just get tall. Again, use the breath to expand the ribs, to create space in the abdominal cavity, but relax at the same time. The last thing is get the neck nice and tall, the jaw is nice and level, right? And I look like a goober, obviously. You're not going to walk around like this all the time. But on your walks, I actually do want you to practice this. Again, not tensing up too much, just trying to become relaxed and trying to make this the new normal, you could call it, for your posture. So again, that's just a basic overview, an introduction, the fundamentals of posture, if you will, of the standing postural corrective exercise. I would highly recommend that you guys do this every single day for the rest of your life. You can do it for 5 minutes at a time. You're doing a corrective while you're assessing yourself in real time, or you can kind of cut this up into maybe 2 sets of 3 minutes, something like that. However you want to do it, 10 minutes if you want, but highly recommend that you guys do this every day. And then practice this during movement while you're walking, because that's the most important component, is to see if you can actually maintain it during the walk. And again, this is why we're coming out with the paid walking guide, because we go over so many more cues and how to improve your posture during walks, which a lot of people are against. All right, that's pretty much it, guys. Again, you can trigger point in between if you feel any knots, tightness, but I'll see you next video. Peace. God bless.